Well, hello everybody. Welcome again. That sounds weird because it's kind of coming out the side of my head. It's going to be weird speaking there, particularly for Anthony. So, yeah, we thought we'd finish off with a little one of these. And does anybody have any questions to kick off with? No. Or should we just go home? Brian's always misbehaving. That's your last chance.
Again? Yeah.
Yes, Sue.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to know if Anthony could repeat what he was saying to Sarah earlier.
Okay, we'll do the mic run.
So I'm asking if Anthony can repeat what he was saying to Sarah earlier. I think it was about mad cow disease, because I couldn't pick up what you were saying, and I'm sure if I couldn't pick it up, there's going to be a few people here with ears like mine.
We also need
So,
to be careful not to put the mic too close to that fucking thing there. I think we're killing Sophia right now. That's very good. That was ear splitting.
Turn the volume down on that a bit.
it just sounded really interesting. I wonder if you wouldn't mind repeating, if you can remember what it was. It was something to do with what had happened around the mad cow disease thing.
I remember, but maybe let's not record this.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can we cut it?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Cut that. Cut this one.
Who's next?
When we are talking about the carnivore diet in such a positive term, I would like to know, are there any patients or persons that should not follow the carnivore diet? That is, as a clinician, that will be important to know. Do you have any kind of experience that there are some adverse effects?
What's that?
What did you answer at the carnivore conference? Are there any conditions that...
Dead people. So they probably wouldn't benefit from a carnivore diet. I can't think of anything. I mean, the presumption is that this is our biologically appropriate diet for our species, and if that's the case, then it should apply to everyone. There may be different people with different medical backgrounds that will have a more difficult transition. They might have some sort of. I had a lady that I spoke to. Her daughter had a very, very rare genetic disorder where her bowels were basically dysfunctional, and she had very serious issues because of that, and stoma, and it was the kids with this disease don't last very long. She put her on a carnivore diet through a peg feeding tube, and just sort of injecting in little minced up chicken and things like that, and she was detoxing so heavily, and these parasites were coming out in the stoma, and all this sort of stuff was happening. So she's healing, but it was actually an intensive process, and she wasn't able to give her daughter beef for a year because she just detoxed so rapidly on the beef versus the chicken that it was just too intense for her little body. So there might be people that, because of how sick they are, they might need to, or they might have a different transition period. But at the end of the day, it should be optimal nutrition for everybody, really, because it's just what we're designed for. So I can't think of any reason why any lion wouldn't do well on gazelle, or while any giraffe would do well on the whatever leaves giraffes eat. And so I think the same thing applies to us. Yeah. And so I don't think there's anybody we should exclude this from.
Do you think there's a Lone Star tick thing?
Oh,
Do you think that's a real thing or not?
it seems to. You go on. Yeah, but they can still do a carnivore diet.
Exactly. Yeah.
They just have to avoid certain meats. Yeah, red meats. And from what I've been told from other people who've treated it, it wears off after a year or two.
So there are two patient groups that may be considered as being at risk, in my opinion. One is those children who are born with an inborn genetic predisposition of not being able to do any of the beta oxidation steps within the mitochondria. But these are really rare. In Hungary there are 1 or 2 cases in 10 million, altogether 10 million, but annually there are not more than that. but they die anyway. They cannot eat anything, not just fat. So, and the other group of people are those who are received organ transplant. This is a theoretical concern, because in these patients the immune response may be heightened after starting the healthy diet, the real healthy diet, because they are living with an organ that is coming from another person, so they need to receive strong immune suppressants to keep this foreign organ in the body. And if we strengthen their own immune system, there is an increased likelihood of this host versus graft reaction. So this is a theory. What I can tell you, we always tell the same thing to patients. They ask the same question again and again. But I can tell you that I am aware of 2 patients who started a very similar diet, undertaking all the risks that they know of, and they have been doing well on the PKD. One was that I can remember, he was starting the PKD after his second liver transplant, and he was doing fine so far. He was following the diet, and he started becoming worse when he stopped doing the diet. So this may only be a theoretical, maybe not in reality. But we do not have much data about it.
Just one thing that possibly, I don't know, PKU, phenylketonuria, potentially, have like phenylalanine sort of toxicity that they might get. That's a potential one. I don't know how people would, because the thing is, there's a lot. I have hemochromatosis patients that don't need to give blood when they go on a carnivore diet, even though there's more iron in the diet, it's more bioavailable, because there's something to do with how their body processes the iron, as opposed to just the amount of iron that they get in their diet. So I don't know if there's something like that with PKU where they can survive and process this better, but that's a potential one. So someone with PKU, I'd probably be a bit cautious, but the likelihood is that by the time you saw them, they'd probably be in adulthood, and after the age of 18, they say 18, but really, probably 25, when the brain's sort of in a more stable position, it probably would be completely fine at that point. So before that is a question mark, though.
May I follow up a little bit? Thank you. Have you heard about anti-galactose? We have had patients that do not feel well or are on a carnivore diet, and there has been proven that they have antibodies towards galactose, which is connected to having Lyme disease. Have any of you seen that?
Yeah, so that would be like the alpha-gal syndrome from like the Lone Star ticks, and that just you have to stay away from like red meat and a lot of some mammalian meat. So, but you can still do a carnivore diet on fish and chicken. I think eggs are fine too. Is that right? Am I getting that right? Yeah. But anyway, yeah, you can sort of look that up, and it's alpha-galactose that you have to watch out for, but that's only in certain meats. And from what I've heard and others up here have heard as well, is that it does wear off after a certain period of time, 6 months, a year, 2 years, something like that. But you can still do a carnivore diet. You just have to avoid those meats. So you can still do like poultry and fish, things like that, eggs, those sorts of things. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question.
My name's Paul, and the first thing I'd like to do is just thank you guys for all the preparation that you put into these 3 days. It's been very informative, challenging and enlightening, the material that you've offered over these last 3 days. I've completed my professional career early. I should be still practicing. I'm a dentist, but I voluntarily retired 2 years ago because of balance issues. And this balancing issue is a consequence of a really weird form of neuropathy, and I have seen countless medical specialists, physiotherapists, all sorts of people trying to sort out what the problem I've got has been. And it started 12 years ago with just tingling in my toes, and then it just basically slowly travelled up my feet and up my calves and into my thighs. So it's now starting to affect my thighs, and it's already wasted away my calf muscles. So my calf muscles probably have about 5% of their capacity now. So my hamstrings do what my calf muscles are supposed to do. So I can still walk, but you probably notice me, I don't walk, I sort of walk uncomfortably, and I've got to be very mindful of where I step, because otherwise I can fall over having such a high centre of gravity. That's one of the benefits of being really short, is your centre of gravity is so much lower. But I went to see I think the cleverest neurologist in Australia, who happens to be a professor in Melbourne, and he looked at me and he scratched his head. He said, I don't know, I've got to go back to the books. But in the meantime, I want to refer you off for a DNA screening. So I had to wait 18 months for that, and I only got the results. I had the test done early this year, and I got the results just 4 months ago. And I've got a neurological condition called Marie-Charcot tooth syndrome. And I thought, yeah, that'd be right. A bloody dentist, and I get something that's got tooth on the end of it. But anyway, there's only 61 reported cases in the world. So they know stuff all about this disease, and they know it's a misspelt gene on one of my chromosomes, and as a consequence of that, and it's only on one leg, and because it's only on one leg, it means that when it kicks in all these people, it kicks in middle age, whereas if you've got it on both legs, it kicks in when you're much younger. So I found this out shortly after starting carnivore, okay, and then I started thinking, I'm a person of faith, and I believe that our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made, so they have the capacity to heal themselves, but we don't see it that often because, as you've all said, we consume crap, okay? We eat food that actually is destructive to our homeopathic systems and everything. So my question to you is, how do we solve my problem, and what's the best way of going about it to turn this gene off, and who do I speak to? Or is it a team approach? How do we go about, addressing this problem I've got? Or do you have any answers? Who do I go to? Which of you guys want to take me on?
Do you want to take it?
I think
you and I spoke last night, didn't we? So I don't want to waste any more time with any answers from. I mean, we had a good in-depth conversation last night, didn't we? So let's bump it over to Anthony to see if he has anything to add. We got to the conclusion possibly that it could be acrylamide from coffee consumption over many years, neurological conditions, as the catalyst. Yeah. But I think it's a condition that's very much unknown, isn't it? And you're looking to reverse that. I think you're doing everything correctly. My approach was to remove the eggs and the cheese because the calcium is excitatory to the muscle. Possibly take a magnesium supplement. And abstain from the coffee moving forward. Also, in regards to cooking, meats, acrylamide is usually caused through reducing sugars, but in meat is caused through a reaction through acrolein, which is caused from the fat being heated. So I suggested maybe we reduce the temperature when cooking, try to avoid barbecue and keeping it below 175, because this is how acrylamide is created. Pan fry, but put the lid on, keep it in its own atmosphere to prevent from charring, and so on and so forth. So those were the steps that I suggested we take moving forward. But if you guys have anything else to add to that, Anthony being the neurosurgeon, I don't know if you're aware of anything else even that condition, but all the bases I think there are covered. And we mentioned consuming, sorry, don't give me the mic. And we also mentioned maybe consuming more of the lamb because of the omega-3. So lamb fat contains 10 times the volume of omega-3s, EPA and DHA, compared to the fat in beef. So the higher the ratio of the omega-3s, the more it's going to offset, because the linoleic acid, the oxidized omega-6, can stay in the body for as much as 5 years, but we can offset this slowly by increasing the omega-3s potentially from the lamb fat, but avoid supplementation of omega-3s.
And I really appreciate all the input you put in there with answering that question last night, Richard. I travelled halfway around the world. I've got a panel of experts.
All for it.
I'm going to put the question out there.
So I would agree with everything that Richard said. I think that I've seen a lot of neurological conditions that have no cure reverse with a very strict carnivore diet. But you have to get all your bases right. You have to get rid of everything that's neurotoxic. Coffee is neurotoxic. Caffeine is neurotoxic. It's a neurotoxin and an insecticide. So I mean, you have to get rid of all these things, right? Making sure you have enough DHA, EPA. B12 is really important. Everyone is low on B12. So when I see patients that come into my clinic in Australia, I typically see them in the 200s or the 300s picomole per liter. And that's fine according to the reference ranges, but the reference ranges are the average for the community, and the average person is sick and malnourished. And so Oxford University published in 2008 a study on B12 that actually showed that people that had under 330 picomoles per liter, after 5 years, their brain shrank by 5% because it demyelinates the axons, causes nerve damage and brain damage. So a lot of people can have problems and they're purely nutritionally related, or nutritional deficiency, or these toxins that they're bringing in, especially neurological conditions. I've seen countless neurological conditions that improve. I have a case series that I'm putting together now. I think I mentioned this yesterday. I think I have about 10 patients now with MS who have reversed their symptoms, and on MRI, their lesions have reduced by up to 50%. That doesn't happen. No one has done. I don't think there's a single published case in the literature of anybody with MS that has actually reversed their lesions. Maybe there has, but I haven't seen them. And so that's quite significant, right? And one of the things I always tell them: get your B12 up, get your vitamin D up, these sorts of things. Naturally, you can do this in the right way. Eat liver, things like that. It's really important to be as strict as possible. Very fatty meat, 2 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. Aim for that, and high quality meat, high quality fat, lamb fat, sure. You want the DHA, you want the EPA, you want the vitamin D, you need the B12, so adding in liver, a couple ounces, 3 days a week, that should be plenty. I, funny enough, actually have consulted with one other person with Marie-Charcot foot, or tooth, sorry, and there's a thing called Charcot's foot, which is the more common Charcot piece of anatomy that's affected. It's early stages. I don't know how they're going. This was just actually last month. So they're going on this, and we'll see how they do. So I can't, unfortunately, tell you any anecdotal sort of results yet, but it's not going to hurt you, and it could very well help. And you want to remember too, this is a genetic issue that causes muscle wasting, and there are other genetic issues that do this as well, such as muscular dystrophy. There's a type of cows get muscular dystrophy, but it's actually called nutritional muscular dystrophy because they figured out that it's actually a selenium deficiency. And because cows cost money and they're worth something, and so they have to figure out what the hell's going wrong, because cows are worth more money healthy. Right, so they have to figure out how to get them healthy. Humans are more valuable sick. We're basically worthless unless we're sick. And so that's where the incentives are. And so there could very well be quite a number of genetic issues that have a genetic predisposition and environmental trigger. The vast majority of issues are in that category. And this is the idea of penetrance. If people have taken genetics, that you have identical twins that have the exact same genes, one has a disease, and 60% of the time, the other twin has a disease. That's a 60% penetrance, right? So that means that there's something in the environment that's affecting this, either turn that off or on. And so that could very well be the case here. Who knows? It could be selenium, right? But it's worth addressing. So you get all your nutrients, vitamins, minerals sorted out. You get rid of everything that could cause any sort of harm, and that includes all plants. And get outside, watch the sunrise, watch the sunset, work on your sleep. Your brain heals when you're asleep. Your growth hormone is maximally secreted when you're asleep as well. It's going to help your nervous system regrow and repair. So you need to optimize yourself and your body and your diet especially, and give your body a chance to heal. It may not be enough, but that at least is going to give you the best chance possible to do that naturally. I think it's very possible that will happen. I've just seen too many people reverse things that are irreversible, that are just progressive, that just don't get better. I've seen it too many times, so I'm not going to discount anything at this point.
I would also suggest to put aside the genetic information because myself I've seen too many cases that is officially thought to be of genetic origin, but in reality not, simply because if you're able to recover a certain disease, then where's the genetics? So anyway, these genetic links for these very rare diseases are actually turned to be genetic, very rare, and the connection is very loose. So even if they are saying genetic, that applies to a very loose statistical significance. So you can easily put it aside because you shouldn't think that this is your fate. And if you didn't have it until now, that is also speaking against genetic origin. Because if it was really genetic, you would have had it from your childhood on. And I fully agree with everything what Anthony said, that you should mind the vitamin levels, you should have to aim the lowest level of inflammation possible. And if you would like to, I can send you a complete blood work list that we use. That you can use as a baseline, and I can tell you that in most cases when carnivore practicing people come to me, I almost never see a perfect blood work as it should look like. So maybe you may think to yourself that you are doing everything that you can according to knowledge, but it's not everything. And whenever you have a baseline blood work, you see where you have to room for an improvement, like B12, folate level, and lowering inflammation, iron, there are many more. Usually there is room for an improvement in many of the aspects.
Yeah, the guys have thought of everything and more that I would have said. But I'd really like to stress what Anthony said and about the light, because we do our healing when we sleep, and so many people, they just don't bother with the light, and so they've got all these downlighters on at night. Here we go a bit, now, but get your house sorted. We have, our house is so red at night, it looks like a brothel from outside. we just got, I think, all we have is like little dim red LEDs inside the 3 snake cages in the living room, and that's it at night, And if anybody even watches the TV, if they do, then there's an orange screen on the front. We really take care of it, and it does make a huge difference. But to give you just a bit of confidence, on what the guys are saying here about genetic things. It's like when you get rheumatoid arthritis or something, or psoriatic or whatever, the rheumatologists always proudly tell you it's this HLA-B27 issue, this sort of genetic whatever. And so you go home, you Google for 2 minutes, and it says, oh yes, these people who, a lot of people who have arthritis have this particular marker. And then you look a bit deeper into it, and you find that like 70 or 80% of people who have that just never get any issue whatsoever. So, so much is blamed on genetics. Don't let that discourage you. But also with neurological things, they can take a while. And don't be, that is the best path you're on. But just, that old analogy I have of turning the engines off on a ferry. It glides on for a bit, even if you're doing the right thing. Can take a while but this is gold. Anybody else?
What about? I'm going to refer it back to Phil again, because I just remember from your story and from your arthritis book that first of all you sorted out the biggest bits of the pie chart with diet and then light and sleep, but it was the emotional and spiritual side that kind of took you over the line, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, but that's so individual. That's difficult to go into here, isn't it? And looking at all the sort of past traumas and stuff. But, you know, again, hose the mud off the car before you polish it, and this is all the hosing technique.
I also forgot to say, the optimal range for B12 that I use for my patients is between 800 and 1200 picomoles per liter. So in Australia it would be 800 to 1200, and for vitamin D it would be 140 to 180, and like, but you can go up from there. We don't really know about like an upper safe limit. You know, some people say, you know, as much as 250 is optimal. I know oncologists that want to get their cancer patients up to 220 or more. So, you know, just it's a lot higher than whatever the reference ranges are. And you know, I can sort of let you guys know some of the reference ranges that I use in my clinic. But those are sort of the main ones for B12 anyway. And vitamin D, 800 to 1200 vitamin B12, and 140 to 180 or above for the. Yeah, no worries. So basically, high normal or above. If you're not high on B12 in Australia or UK, you're low, right?
Hi guys. I want to start off by saying that fun little story. The way that I came to carnivore was by sitting on my drum set, wanting to find a song that I wanted to play by one of my favorite bands called Carnivore. And I was pissed off online because I couldn't find it because I found all this other stuff. But at the same time, I was sitting on my drum set in pain, much like Phil has experienced many times in his life. Arthritis, shingles, IBS, and it just kept getting worse a year and a half ago. I went on the meat diet, and after seeing a bunch of different interviews and statements, and I thought to myself, I'll try it, but I'm not going to tell my mum. My mom's a nutritionist in Canada. She's a holistic practitioner, right? And she's very much against the idea. She hates ketogenic, right? But she's board certified nutritionist, right? So I guess that would explain that. Now, when I started doing the carnivore diet in its maybe traditional sense, it messed me up really badly after 3 months. And I found out that it was probably because I was a big eater. I was an athlete, I was a gymnast most of my life, and I ate massive quantities. So when I came into carnivore, I was eating a kilo, like 1,200 grams tomahawk in one sitting, right? And I'm 180, 70 kilos. I'm not like this guy over here. And so what ended up happening is I ended up finally discovering PKD. And that changed everything for me until I got a massive gallbladder problem. And it almost killed me. Like it swelled, it secreted all the sludge, my pancreas swelled up, stomach got closed, and nothing could escape. And so my aunt actually had a similar thing. She had a gallbladder attack, stone got in the pancreas, and they had to emergency operate, rip it all out, and uninstall everything, all right? So I guess it's kind of a two-part question in the sense that, you know, asking the risks of carnivore, that was my experience. And now here I am a year and a bit later, shingles is gone, IBS is gone, arthritis is gone. But the journey for me to get there was not easy. You know, I'm asking my wife, the amount of stuff that we had to go through, she's a biologist, so she was helping me decipher a lot of the online literature and papers that I had to dive through. And I found so little information on gallbladder, cortisol, how that all really ties in together, and that for me was such an important part of my journey to understand it. And so I've heard some people say, and this is kind of like something I want to shoot out right now, is some people say you should not do a meat-based diet without an emphasis on ketogenic approach, at least in the beginning. Other people say it's not necessary. And that I want to get your opinion on that, and because specifically I've heard that if you're not eating enough fat, you could end up with adrenal issues, from the kidneys and so on and so forth, always driving gluconeogenesis. I've heard pros and cons on both sides. So that's I guess the first step I want to ask, and thank you.
So presumably you said you had a stone that got caught and blocked up your pancreas, is that right? Sludge. Okay,
So that's how I ended up contacting Phil afterwards, and he helped me sort that out.
Don't reveal my quackery.
Yeah.
I will get beaten up if I tell you how we did that.
Well, so the thing is that gallstones only form when you're not eating enough fat, and so because you make bile in your liver, it's stored in your gallbladder. Your gallbladder is designed to store, but to concentrate your bile. And in physiology textbooks, it says very plainly it's going to get concentrated up to 20-fold, right? And so what happens to any hyper-concentrated solution at rest? Forms crystals, precipitates, right? And so maybe there's some people that are more predisposed to concentrating it even more than 20-fold, and they may be predisposed to getting stones, but it's really only if you're not eating enough fat. And by enough fat, I mean as much fat as your body's making bile for, right? Because I don't think your body's made a mistake and just guessed about, and then just made a random amount of bile to get a random amount of fat. It's an energy dependent process. It takes a lot of resources, very valuable resources that your body's going to be very miserly and controlling of. And so I just don't think it's just doing that on accident. So I think it wants to get that much fat. So I think you need to get that much fat. It's very important to get a lot of fat. So the question of like, well, if you're just eating a ton of protein, is that a problem? Well, it is if you're not getting enough fat. And fat's really important. It's not just a calorie source. It's an essential nutrient, a set of essential nutrients, essential fatty acids you have to have, or you can get sick and die. They're essential fat soluble nutrients that you have to have, or you'll get sick and die. And they only exist in animal fat. And so it's very important to get enough fat. Also, if you are ketogenic and you're not getting some calories from carbohydrates, and you're getting a majority of calories from protein, you can actually get sick from that. So you need a majority of your calories from something else besides protein. And so if you're just doing meat, then it needs to be from fat, right? As far as, does it have to be ketogenic when you're eating more meat? It can be whatever you want. It's just that eating meat is getting you the nutrients that you need. And so that's the nutrition side of things. And it doesn't have the bad with the good, it's just the good, right? And so if you're eating carbohydrates, you're going to raise your blood sugar, and that's going to be damaging to your body, so you're going to raise insulin in response, which is also going to damage your body, but it's not as much as the glucose, so you have a problem with that. The other things cause harm. The meat has a benefit, it has the nutrients that you need and your body has to have, and everything else does harm. I mean, they may come with nutrients as well, may give you a quick hit of energy, but they do cause harm in the long run. So if people just eat more meat and that replaces out a lot of other things, they're already moving in the right direction. I think that's great. So when Sarah was talking today about, did people rip the Band-Aid off, or did they, limp along into a carnivore diet? That's sort of what that's referring to. You're sort of going in the right direction, but not quite going all the way. Either one is fine. It just depends on what's going to get you there. For me, I really like just striking while the iron's hot, just getting going on it. When I found out how toxic plants were, and I just wanted nothing to do with them, and there was no way I was going to eat them. So that happened overnight for me. And I see a lot of people that they're really motivated and they want to do it. It's probably a good idea just to get going with it.
I mean, the symptoms that I had in the first 3 months before attempting PKD was tired, constipation, like severe constipation.
Oh, definitely not enough fat.
Because not enough fat.
Yeah.
And then heart palpitations and so on and so forth because of electrolyte imbalance.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. When it's good that you looked into it, because those are easy fixes. Yeah. And people can run into that, and so it's important to figure out why the hell that's happening.
Would you say that after doing perhaps the ketogenic thing for a couple of years, I won't need to do 1/3 fat all the time, and I can reduce that without risk of going back, or is it just best to stay that way?
You just need a certain amount of fat. You need the amount of fat that your body's making bile for. So really, what you want to do is you want to keep eating fat until your body can't absorb it anymore, and that's what keeps your stool soft. So that's a real easy way of figuring out how much fat you're getting. Because that little excess, because your body makes a limited amount of bile, that means you can absorb a limited amount of fat. it's very difficult for your body to absorb fat without bile. It can absorb some, but it's mostly MCTs. The rest of it has to have bile. So it's like less than 10% will be absorbed without bile. And funny enough, that was in one of the questions in the board exams in Australia. I'm like, oh, they know that? That's amazing. Yeah. They're like, yeah, how much fat can you absorb without bile? That was actually one of the questions. I was like, oh, that's good. At least they know something. Right?
Well, it's all working good now. But the stumbling blocks, they were
yeah, definitely. And that's why these groups, where people or dealing with a coach that has seen this sort of stuff before can help you work through that, or being in a group with thousands of other people who have sort of seen these sorts of things before, they can, because those are actually pretty common pitfalls. And someone who's seen that before, people who have experienced that before, I mean, you're going to be able to spot that in someone a mile away. And, ooh, this is what you should do. That's what I did. And so that those things are really helpful. Eventually, will you eat less fat? Well, maybe. But just see what happens. See what your body wants to do. If you're getting severe constipation, as in very dry, hard, constipated stools, then by definition you're not eating enough fat, and that'll soften up once you get that. And then if you're eating way too little fat, you can actually get loose stools. You can actually get watery diarrhea as a result of that. Sort of a U-shaped curve. When you try, do an experiment. Just sit down with a jar of ghee, just eat the whole thing, see what happens. So it's a U-shaped. It's a U-shaped curve, right? So too little, you'll get watery diarrhea. Too much, you'll get watery diarrhea.
No worries about adrenaline issues and cortisol issues down the road doing this long term, then, in your opinion?
No. Richard and I did a whole thing on is ketosis harmful. It was like 2.5 hours. We went through all the all ketosis is going to kill you nonsense. It's nonsense. They're quoting different studies with small numbers for short periods of time, and we're talking, and we're looking at studies with large numbers over 2 years, and there's no detriment to the cortisol.
I'm more concerned with the gluconeogenesis than the actual state of ketosis.
Your body's supposed to do that, though. You're not putting yourself in a stressed state. The idea that this is a stressed state is just a misconception. We call this a fasting state, a stress state. Our normal state is a glucose-filled, insulin-rich state. That's not a normal state. I mean, I hope I made that pretty clear about how inappropriate it is to have elevated insulin, how many harmful things happen because of that. The reason that we call that a fasting state or a stress state or whatever, it just comes down to the fact that by the time we were looking at biochemistry at a molecular level, everybody was eating carbohydrates. And so they said, when you eat, your biochemistry looks like this. And when you don't eat, it looks like this. And so they said, when you're starving, you're fasting, it's this other state. And so they assumed that was a stress state, right? Because if you're starving, that's not fun, right? But they fail to realize that if you eat anything else besides carbohydrates, it also looks like you're in this fasting stress state, right? So it's misnamed. And in fact, I was speaking to my niece who's pre-med in America now, and she was taking biochemistry this year, and she said, they don't call it a fed state and a fasting state anymore. They call it a carbohydrate state and a non-carbohydrate state. So they actually renamed it because it's stupid, right? And so that's not a stress state. That's not it is the metabolic state you'll be in when you're fasting. That's also a metabolic state that you're in when you're eating your natural diet. It's the natural state of lions and wolves and cows. Yeah, really. Why the hell is it a cow? They eat plants though, right? But they absorb fat and protein. So ketosis is the natural state of animal life on Earth, pretty much. I don't know what the hell a bumblebee's metabolism is, eating honey, but I don't much care. And think about, the Inuit, think about everybody alive during the Ice Ages. We know that humans were thriving in the Arctic Circle during the Ice Ages. Where are the yams in the Arctic Circle during the Ice Ages? People say, there's these guys in Papua New Guinea and they eat a whole bunch of yams. The yams are New World food. Those came to Papua New Guinea a few hundred years ago.
I know you're not going to find berries in the living there.
No, and it's actually warmer now than it was then, because it was the little ice age during the 1600s and things like that. Yeah.
Minus 40 on average.
Yeah, exactly. So the traditional diet of the Inuit and the First Nation people is meat. I mean, what else are they eating? So they're in ketosis. They're in ketosis lifelong. Their kids are. A fetus in the womb is in ketosis. A breastfeeding infant is in ketosis. Has to be, because that's how the brain grows. Because it needs ketones to grow, because they reconstitute into fatty acids in the brain and form the physical structures of the brain. And they're also the optimal fuel for the brain and the heart and the intestines and other organs too. And actually, when you're in ketosis, it's the optimal fuel for your muscles too. You get about 9, even for world-class athletes, Ironman athletes, and distance runners and things like that. They're getting the majority of their energy from fat oxidization, over 92% VO2 max, if they're in ketosis, right? So fat is our fuel. We are fativores. We're not carbivores, right? So no, you're not going to hurt yourself. You're not going to stress yourself out. You're not going to screw up your cortisol or anything like that. Right? You're not going to screw up your thyroid. I've been doing this for 6 years. I just took my bloods again, and they're absolutely perfect. I don't even waste my time really. It's just every few years I'm just like,
My mom told me to check my testosterone because if the cortisol's going to get injected, then that's going to go down.
Yeah, your testosterone will go up.
Yeah.
Every single patient I've ever had, the testosterone go up.
I feel like,
Yeah,
just say it.
I have a patient who's a 72-year-old man, and his testosterone was bottomed out, right? He's 72. Put him on a carnivore diet. 6 months later, it had tripled and was ideal for a healthy 25-year-old, not a 25-year-old now, not an average 25-year-old, an optimal 25-year-old they should be at. And conversely, I had an 18-year-old kid whose testosterone should have been screaming out of his ears. It was lower than the 72-year-old man.
Yeah.
2 months on a carnivore diet, it had over doubled, right? And he wasn't even 100% strict. He had cheat days, but he's mostly eating meat and mostly ketogenic, right? So it makes a massive difference. And if you do test your testosterone, always check it in the morning, between 8 and 9 a.m., fasted for 12 hours. No exercise for 48 hours before. No stress, exercise, or sexual activity for 48 hours before the test. It always has to be in the morning because you get your spike in the morning, an hour before you wake up, according to your circadian rhythm. So you get this big spike. That's why you wake up as you do, and then it goes down, right? So if you test your testosterone at 8:30 in the morning, and then the next time you test it at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it goes down, and oh my God, this carnivore diet's destroyed my testosterone. Like, no. It's just you didn't test it at the right time. So test it then. I absolutely guarantee that you'll have a very good number. You'll be fine.
Thank you very much.
Anthony, what you missed about the Inuit is that they only stay healthy because they eat absolutely all of the vegetable matter out of the intestines. This is what several vegans have told me.
So all the vegetable matter out of the intestines of polar bear and seals?
Exactly. Well, anything, yeah, exactly.
They eat carnivores. They eat, Arctic carnivores. They eat whales. They eat seals. They eat polar bear. And they could eat caribou too, but a lot of it's seal and polar bear. So, that's a weird one.
It's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah,
one of their best.
Yeah, well, they said about lions too. Oh, they eat the stomach contents and this, that, and the other. I've literally seen a video of a lion that this technique where they're chewing on the intestine, but they're like sort of using their tongue to like just work out the poop and then like push it out as they're eating it. They're just sort of pushing it out, so they don't have to eat that stuff. So no, they're not getting the vegetable matter.
Can I add something? Sorry,
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay, so many phenomena have been touched, and I would like to just sort out a few of them. I would give you a slightly different suggestion as regarding what to do as a next step, because this may seem like a quick advice that experiment on your own, change this, change that. But this is not how this works, in my opinion. There may be so many mistakes, so many nuances that may look over. There have been a few that haven't been touched. There have been touched others that are not very important, in my view. And you can experiment for years and years and years, and while not being able to find the sweet spot of all these very important variables. So I really do suggest that you ask advice. So if you do the PKD, if you believe it's best, then ask advice from a PKD expert. I'm not willing to advise myself, but I know what the most important pitfalls are with a PKD. With those patients who try to do their best, they never do their best. I'm not blaming you, not their mistake. It is just so many nuances, and it's nothing about whether ketosis is healthy or not, because it's not a question, not even a question that it is good. You can do a ketosis in a good way. You can base on vegetable oils, dairy, and you can base on animal fats, two different worlds. Just as you mentioned, the kidney stone, this is also something, or the gallbladder stone, yeah, the very similar mechanism behind. So if you got a gallbladder stone and a gallbladder attack, it doesn't mean that you just had the gallbladder stone the day before.
Yeah.
It has been there for weeks, months. But what I can tell you, if somebody is doing the PKD, he will not be building gallbladder stones anymore. But you can very easily develop a gallbladder stone so far your diet is containing milk or any milk protein. Yeah, but if you have been doing before, even on the Western type diet or the carnivore diet, and then you excrete the gallbladder stone while on the PKD, that's not because of the PKD. This is a very common experience that the patient starts doing. Shift from the classical ketogenic diet to the PKD, and then the third week she had a kidney stone attack, and then they think it is because of the PKD, but it is just the time when the body managed to get excreted the kidney stone that has been sitting there for who knows for how long time. So you need to be very cautious with the causation.
I was going to jump in this, but I'm going to take up another half an hour with the question. Do you want me to get into this? You sure? So look, coming back to what Anthony said, we covered that podcast, didn't we, with Dr. McCullough and Jordan Dinkoff, where they said that ketogenic lifestyles for prolonged periods would increase cortisol, which we disproved, I think, in, as you say, 2.5 hours sitting down, which is an awesome podcast. What I would add to this, I know exactly where you're coming from in regards to cortisol and gluconeogenesis. If you are an athlete and training for prolonged periods of time, despite high rates of beta oxidation, you are going to require cortisol, constantly high elevated levels of cortisol for extreme events. So if you're running 6-minute miles for a half marathon, for example, you're in a highly stressed state. There's a phenomenon called GAS, which came out in the 1930s, which looks at cortisol activation and our ability to maintain it for prolonged periods of time. We don't want to be in excessively elevated levels of cortisol for prolonged periods of time, because this dampens or impacts the negative feedback loop and leads to a positive feedback loop, which increases cortisol, which eventually will lead to the production of no cortisol, which as a carnivore or someone living a ketogenic lifestyle is fatal. We need glucose via gluconeogenesis. So if you're an athlete and you're training in zone 2, then this is fine. If you're competing, i.e. an Ironman, or you're running or cycling at a high intensity for prolonged periods of time, during training, you need to do split training. So you need to split your training, divide it by 2, train in the morning, leave a 6 to 8 hour window and train again in the afternoon. Prolonged periods are going to lead to damage to the pituitary, which, as you say, is going to decrease testosterone, increase triglycerides. It's going to make it look like you have thyroid issues. And any blood tests that you get are going to be indicative of thyroid damage, but it's not thyroid damage, it's not adrenal damage. Adrenal fatigue doesn't really exist, by the way. It's damage to the pituitary, and the adrenals are downstream of this. So in regards to training, try to implement a split training approach, because your body does need high levels of glucose.
I had to get into ketosis. I ended up only doing resistance training for no more than 45 minutes at a time. As a drummer, I couldn't sit on the drum set for more than 30 minutes without my cortisol spiking and dropping onto ketosis, so I had to stop drumming for a while. And that was unfortunate, but now I'm at that point where I want to get back into it, and I just don't know what path to take. So
Play more funk, less heavy metal.
easily said than done, right?
But do you want to jump on? But we can get into this, as I say, after. Thank you.
I have a question regarding vitamin B12 especially, because you said about 800 or up to 1200 or something like that. Question one, is it possible, or is it a regular thing to go that high on a carnivore diet? And second, is it easier with the methylation on the carnivore diet? But because lots of people have problem with that, so we usually use methylated vitamin B for quite a lot of our patients.
So typically with people with MTHFR, they may need more, but I often find that just having 50 to 100 grams of liver 3 days a week usually takes care of that, or include it in some way, or maybe a bit more. But but test and see how they do. Like for in my recent blood results, on no supplements, taking no vitamins or injections or anything like that. My B12 was 860. My vitamin D was 170. That was just what it was, and so I'll often see that. I'll also see people that are on a carnivore diet, but they're eating just normal store-bought meat, grain-finished, sort of whatever meat, and maybe a mix between red meat and other meat. They might be up in the 700s. They may not quite crest 800. Everybody that I've had as a patient that is eating, grass-fed, finished, regeneratively raised meat, that's really things can be called grass-fed that aren't. In Australia, you can put a cow in a feedlot for up to 89 days before you have to take off the grass-fed sticker, right? So you say grass-fed, it's actually been in a feedlot for 3 months, So it depends on where they're getting it from, but my patients that do all the grass-fed, finished, regenerative, all that stuff, I mean, they're up, over 1,000 typically. They typically don't have any problems. If someone has MTHFR, like 44% of women do, so it's obviously quite prevalent. They just may need more higher quality meat and add in organs like liver, and that seems to do the trick. Then when I have had a few patients that they've even done that, they're eating high quality meat, they were adding, the B12 just wasn't coming up. I was giving them injections, it was coming down, of methylcobalamin, and it just kept coming down to under 400. And under 400 you get demyelination, and so I was like, okay, well that's absolutely not acceptable to be under 500. Really, I'd give someone an injection if they were under 500 picomoles per liter. So I have had a couple patients that even though they're eating high quality meat and they've added in liver and I'm giving them injections, their B12 just keeps coming down and keeps coming down. So obviously that's a malabsorption issue, right? So that there's really nothing else because there's plenty in their diet. And I checked for pernicious anemia, and they had it. So it's that's another possibility too. We don't even think about pernicious anemia until someone's dying from this and is anemic, right? But you can get it's a gradient. You can get antibodies for pernicious anemia, and you can damage your parietal cells to the point that you are just very limited in your ability to absorb B12, but it's not complete yet. So it doesn't quite get to, because pernicious anemia is fatal without supplementation, without injections or sublingual B12. So before they get to that point, they're going to have just a very difficult time getting proper levels of B12. It's a bit difficult because sometimes, the treatment for an autoimmune issue is the carnivore diet. And really the lion diet. And so if someone's been on a lion diet for a number of months and their B12 is just not doing what it's supposed to do, and I check them for pernicious anemia, it may be that they have no detectable antibodies because we've suppressed that with an autoimmune diet, right? Or it could be that it's not there, but either way, they're deficient, and it's not coming up. Okay, they need to go on like sublingual methylcobalamin or get regular injections. Yeah, because there is a malabsorption issue there. Metformin is a big one. Metformin blocks out the absorption of B12, so that's one thing. So even when I have patients that are on, just red meat and water with liver, they might be in the 500s. Often won't be above 600 if they're on metformin. So I would say they would need to do like a sublingual methylcobalamin as well. If also had a couple patients that they just had their pernicious anemia antibodies just over the detectable level. But the reference range might say, oh, below 6 is fine. And they're at a 2. Okay, 2 is fine. Well, no, if you have antibodies towards yourself, you have an autoimmune disease. It's just not in a flare-up, right? So it should be 0. So any autoimmune, if you're ever testing for any autoimmune issue, that should be 0 or below the detectable range. If it's in the detectable range, that means you have it. And so I've had at least 2 patients that have been in that category, that they're just in that detectable range for their parietal cell antibodies or intrinsic factor antibodies, and so that tells you what you need to know. Okay, so the diet is keeping the antibodies low, but this was a problem that did exist, and you've damaged those cells, so it's going to be difficult for you to absorb B12. Maybe that comes back. Maybe that ability to generate intrinsic factor comes back, but until then, they need supplementation.
I jump on that a second really quickly. Just to add in regards to methylation and slow methylation, I think you've hit the head on the nail there, Anthony, with liver. Many of us who suffer with low methylation, we look at methylation in 2 different cycles. The folate cycle, B9, and obviously the methionine cycle. But downstream from this, there's a number of other cycles, the BH4 cycle, the sulfuration cycle, and the urea cycle. They're all connected. B3, B6, B9, B12, each and every one of us speaks about quite a lot. The one that we miss is vitamin B2. Now this is critical for methylation, especially with low or slow methylation. So increase in vitamin B2 is essential, and we do this via liver. If we're living a carnivore-based lifestyle, then generally the amount of B2 that we're consuming is between 0.2 to 0.5 milligrams, and slow methylation requires as much as 2 to 3 milligrams, almost 10 times the amount. So anyone suffering with slow methylation, they need to supplement with a B supplement, or preferably beef liver in particular.
Yeah, liver is a supplement, right? I mean, the organs are nature's supplements, yeah? So.
Preference liver over anything, yeah.
Sorry? Oh, the desiccated beef capsule? Yeah, I mean, you can, but it's literally 1 bite of liver, so,
But you don't need much from the liver, about 100 grams of liver.
Yeah, exactly.
In a couple of days.
Yeah, so it's like, it's literally like just 1 bite a few days a week, so, grub up. The thing is like those desiccated beef capsules, you look at them and I looked at one the patient brought in, and I told her to grow up too, and but each capsule had 400 milligrams of beef liver, right? And there were 120 capsules, so you figure that out. It's like half a kilo of liver in this thing. It's desiccated, so it's dry, so maybe double that. So it's like a kilo. The thing costs $70. I mean, you're talking about $70 for $10 worth of liver. You just eat the liver. It's better for you, and it's a lot cheaper. Yeah, if you really want the desiccated one, you can get dog treats that are like desiccated liver, like big chunks of them. They cost nothing, and you just have those. I ate those. I got those for my cat. He's like this carnivore cat. He just freaks out whenever there's meat. So I got him these little things. And he runs around. He likes to eat them with him. So I eat one, and throw one to him. So it's way cheaper.
Hi.
I'm on one of these rare cases, MS, which lesions shows in the MRI that they got better on carnivore, but my body didn't recognize that. So I still struggled and had some issues on MS. And so I was lucky in the beginning that Dr. Chafee recommended to up my B12, my vitamin D, and also to take liver every day. So that helped me with the first seizures I had when I first started carnivore. The second time it didn't help anymore, so I was lucky that somebody also in this community, so again, carnivore community helps, told me about B1. So it wasn't B2, but it was B1, so that helped the second time. The B12 didn't help anymore, the vitamin D didn't help. One thing though that was a little bit strange is that my iron dropped the most when I had this liver every day and I had my red meat. And it dropped so low that it was worse than before, that usually women have. So I don't understand quite how these things can drop that when we are carnivore. That's one thing. And the other thing I don't understand is all the histamine issues, because I watched basically every video and every tip. I followed everything on histamine. But even here, me and my roommate had major issues with the meat. We couldn't breathe because of whatever it was inside or whatever it was in the end. But yeah, what are your best tips on histamine issues? Because I recognize that a lot of people have some histamine pills with them, so I think it's something common. And how the body, when doesn't it keep all the good vitamins from the meat? What is the problem with most of the things?
Can I have Sophie's one? Be interesting.
So I would warn anybody to blame certain symptoms on the histamine, because it is, in my opinion, according to science, it is a non-existing phenomenon. So it's something similar as oxalate dumping. So you need to look for something else. And nobody is questioning the symptom itself, because it is something that you feel, so it should be there, but it should be seen as an indication of something else that is not going well in your body. And the whole blood work should be seen and based on everything that is needed to be seen in the blood work. We can give you a feedback, because iron level can drop for too many reasons. Okay, it's not only a factor of how much liver, how much red meat you eat, or whether you eat red meat at all. One of the most frequent laboratory alterations that I see is the low iron level in people that are eating carnivore. So it is not just the function of whether you eat red meat. You can develop very severe anemia on the carnivore diet if it is not done in a proper way, if the meat-fat ratio is not proper, if you are overeating the meat, if there is an infection in your body or inflammation going on, all these things can lower your iron level. And which of these is happening to you can be identified based on your blood work. So again, if you have this disease, do not experiment yourself or try to resolve your own issue, because you won't be able to do this, because you do not have the reference. You are a single patient for yourself, and you will not be able to. You have to see many patients before who had the same issue and could resolve the same issue. And the same resolution will work for you too.
Yeah, so just to echo some of that, there's something called anemia of chronic disease, where you get a lot of stress and illness for a long-term period of time, a lot of inflammation, and this actually makes your body sequester iron, usually in your bone marrow, and you actually get anemic because of this. So your ferritin in particular is an acute phase reactant, and it can go up and down dependent on other things going on in your body, and so getting a complete iron study can help see what's going on. Is there something going on? Your body's hiding the iron for some reason. Iron's really weird. Iron is the only thing you can be both high and low on at the same time, because it sort of sequesters in different areas in your body and does different things. So it is important to do sort of a whole blood panel and sort of get a deeper look into that, because certainly you're going to have enough iron in your diet, and you should do anyway. So unless you have some sort of like bleeding issue that you're losing a lot, then it's probably something else. As far as histamines are concerned, there's certainly reactions that people get, and when they eat certain meats and they have aged meat and it causes a reaction, whether that's histamines or something else, it's there. And so the best thing to do is just take notes of these things. Have a food journal and to write down what you eat, and when you get symptoms, and see if there's a connection. And if you do find a pattern, then try to avoid those things, and then you are just isolating out the foods that are problematic for you, and you're just including the ones that are good for you. And regardless of the cause, you're getting that reaction. So just try to figure out which ones are causing you to feel that way, and just try to avoid those.
Yeah, look, if it is a histamine thing, then diamine oxidase, so kidney, for example, maybe implement some kidney into the diet. Tyramine is another thing, again, found in things like cheese and aged meats. But aged meats is a big problem for many people. As I gravitated into the lifestyle, what I found was that I became what seemed to be more susceptible to things. But in fact, what actually happened is my body's become heightened to certain compounds in the same way that it does with alcohol. So the first time you drink a glass of wine or a beer, you feel a little bit tipsy and it affects you a lot. The more you drink, the less it affects you, or at least seemingly. But behind the scenes, that alcohol is still causing the damage, but your ability to recognize that damage is being diminished. And then as you gravitate into the lifestyle, your body comes to life again, and you're able to recognize whenever you put a toxin in. So for me, for example, one of the most recent things that I've removed was black pepper. So whenever I consume black pepper, my body just explodes. So it's about finding these things and adapting to them and trying to reduce and remove them. But aged meats and cheese is going to be a big contributing factor, whether it is histamine or tyramine or anything else for that matter.
Or dairy.
Or dairy, yeah.
Or oxalates.
Yeah, regardless of what they are, whether we believe in oxalate dumping or oxalate detox, there's definitely something going on there, whether it's oxalate themselves. And we see it often. I mean, it's the protocol for oxalates, for example, is usually calcium. But adding in calcium can offset magnesium, and this upsets potassium, and it throws the whole electrolyte balance out of whack. And quite often when people seem to suffer with oxalate dumping issues, whether it's oxalate or not, they usually suffer with hypokalemia, which is low potassium. So, and the reason for this is that oxalate, if it is a thing, has a high affinity to potassium. So to offset this, rather than supplement with calcium, you'd be better off and confer more benefit to supplementing with a potassium citrate. So this is going to keep the electrolyte balance in whack. And what we find is that when you supplement with potassium citrate, then all of these things tend to clear up, and they tend to be cyclical. So we can see, that when we suffer with whether oxalate dumping or said symptoms, that when we put these in, it goes away. So there's definitely something going on there, whether it is oxalate. I mean, these plants that we consume, they contain hundreds of compounds that we don't even know of. So it's hundreds and hundreds of toxins. And I do believe that we certainly go through a detoxification phase, and we see this from the start of living the lifestyle right to the very end. I'm well over a decade into my journey, and I still seem to go through cyclical phases of detoxing something or another. And most recently for me, it's been black pepper. So if you suffer with cold sores, for example, then piperine is a compound that you don't want to consume. So another one to maybe break some hearts with those that we spoke about coffee with the other day. Apologies.
Pub quiz question. You raised the thing about plant toxins. This came as a surprise to me. I know we've gone completely off whatever it was you actually asked about.
The question I would have is why histamine pills work then for most people, if you said histamine is not a thing.
Because the diamine oxidase. So again, just eat some kidney, go back to nature, eat some organ meats, kidney in particular. So slice the kidney, just pan fry it. In some butter, tallow, lard, or ghee, preferably tallow or something, but yeah, kidneys.
What about liver? German Leberwurst. Liverwurst, when you guys say that?
Yeah, liver sausage.
Yeah, well, it depends what else.
Pate, right?
It depends what else they put in it. You know, make your own.
Yeah.
Get Natalie's book. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna have kidneys, then just pro tip: when you cut it up, soak it in water for a while. It gets the pee out of the tubules.
Oh, really?
Traditionally, it's milk as well. But
Oh, so that's that nasty smell when you fry it up, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kidneys.
Hot piss.
okay.
You said that with kidneys you should soak them and clean them really well.
Yeah, because there's urine in the tubules, right? It's coming out to the ureter.
So there's still pee in the kidneys. Yeah, when you get there, it's a little bit. Yeah, so you slice them up. If you have it whole and it's just sort of going in just the one ureter, or maybe two before joints to make a one. You might still get it out there. So you sort of slice it in half, slice it into bits, and you soak that in water for a bit. It really helps the flavor. Yeah. I see that you're really looking forward to getting your kidneys. Yeah. Well, that's why I wanted to help. So yeah.
Thank you. Somebody at the back, yes. I remember.
Thank you. This is a question I want to direct to Rich. There's been quite a lot of talk recently in the community about the decline of NAD+ as we age, and I was just wondering what your thoughts might be on exogenous supplementation of that compound.
We really need 2 microphones.
And your exercise, you have to do it in sprints.
I did my exercise this morning.
It's chronic cardio.
What was it, Mark?
You have to sprint.
Basically, could we supplement with NAD+. Look, unsure, I'll be honest. I'm attending a course shortly with Dr. Abs on NAD+. NAD+ is essential. And again, as we age, this is declined as the cell creates energy for various other reasons. But we can increase by living a ketogenic lifestyle. So why supplement with something? There are a lot of talk about other supplements on the market that can do lots of other super fandangle things like NAC and so on and so forth. But many of these compounds will activate and overexpress the NRF2 pathway. Got to get that in. Always got to get the NRF2 in. The issue with the NRF2 is it's an oxidative stress pathway, so it's not an antioxidant pathway. We're told that antioxidants from plants are antioxidant because they express this pathway, but it's in fact an oxidative stress pathway. Their overexpression will activate nuclear factor kappa B and lead to lots of inflammatory cytokines and interleukins and so on and so forth. So supplementation, I own a supplement company, yet I don't recommend supplements. Diet always comes first. The things that I produce are food-based, things like electrolytes and MCTs and so on and so forth. But in regards to NAD, to increase NAD, I don't know. I believe that we should provide the body with the nutrients that it needs to create these things naturally. And the best way to do this is by living an evolutionarily appropriate diet and living a ketogenic or carnivore-based diet, regardless of what your fat content is. There's varying degrees of the amount of fat that people suggest that we should consume, and I think it depends on the person and the circumstance. I always come back to how nature intended. So if we look at an egg, for example, it contains equal numbers of protein to fat in grams, roughly. And again, it depends on the cut. It's similar with beef and chicken breast with the skin on and so on and so forth. So if we consume as nature intended, then in a normal state, we should obtain everything that we need. I no longer add fat to anything that I cook. I used to cook in tallow, for example, which is a fantastic source of fat. I don't add any fat to cooking. I don't have any issues with ketone levels, which is another concern. People track ketone levels, and the issue with doing this and tracking ketone levels specifically is that they change over time. So when we begin a ketogenic lifestyle, ketones from the breath and the urine are increased because of the acetone, and then these decrease. But then we resort to measuring ketones in the blood, beta-hydroxybutyrate. Over time, these will decrease because the body becomes more efficient. So even tracking ketones in the blood over time, for someone who's been living a ketogenic or carnivore-based lifestyle for a prolonged period of time, you'll find that their ketone levels naturally reduce. And they're not doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that they're over-consuming too much animal protein or not enough fat. It just means that they're in a state of upregulation. They've upregulated the monocarboxyl transporters, which are the transporters we need to utilize beta-hydroxybutyrate. transporters that are used for thyroid hormone and other hormones in the body as well, interestingly. But look, I'm not a fan of, we see these crazy people injecting NAD plus and all these other compounds. I don't think we need to. I think we're going to confer more benefit from removing toxic compounds, i.e. plants, living a ketogenic based lifestyle and thriving in that way. Does that help? Yeah, awesome answer. When I've done that course with Dr. Abs, I'll let you know, because it's not something that I'm a fan of, but it is something that is of interest, so the reason I'm attending the course. But I'll keep you updated.
Thank you very much for answering questions for us. I've got one for you that, being an ex-doctor myself, because I don't practice anymore, what I love hearing about is success stories in patients, right? So what I'd love to know from each one of you is one of your very favourite turnaround from someone who was really desperate, struggling with their health, to it's just amazing what's happened to them. If you wouldn't mind sharing, please.
You've seen quite a bit on our challenges that you've been part of. Ben has.
I can't think of it. Story you've heard.
I think for me, coming into the realm of cancer, Ewing sarcoma, which is a type of cancer in the bones, a client of mine came to see me. He's involved in Premiership football, quite high profile. His nephew, 10-year-old nephew, failed chemotherapy, went on to a ketogenic based lifestyle, but wanted to predominate animal proteins over the fat. So this is a case of a lower fat carnivore ketogenic based lifestyle, now cancer free. 3 to 4 years on, so I mean that's absolutely incredible. I've experimented with other clients with breast cancer and things. We've gone with higher fat, and that's been super successful also. But almost every client that I've worked with in regards to diabetes, 100% success rate to those who have stuck with these things. What else was there? There was advanced polycystic kidney disease, which is meant to be irreversible, and it degrades at 5% year on year. This young lady came to see me, didn't want to live a ketogenic based lifestyle, so supplemented with... What was that?
Well, it's PKD, isn't it? That confuses people. Polycystic kidney disease.
Yeah, polycystic kidney disease. Yeah. So this is meant to be slow degradation, 5% year on year, and it's meant to be irreversible. So she began with supplementing with MCT and exogenous ketones, and it stopped it in its tracks. So over 2 years, there was no further growth. Then,
wait, just without that, not actually dietary.
Yeah. So she didn't want to make, so she was one of these stubborn people who didn't want to eat beef liver, for example. But after that, she decided to go down the ketogenic route. Again, high fat ketogenic lifestyle, and now that appears to be in remission, which is, I think, as far as I'm aware, is absolutely unheard of. So again, it comes back to what these guys are saying, that lots of these clinical trials and research papers show that these things are impossible, but when you put it into practice, we see the reversal. The body wants to heal, and I think if we supply it with the correct nutrients, and more importantly, remove the anti-nutrients, then the body can do some incredible things.
Go on, good. I've got one with myself. Was it May last year? I had, I think, the final gout attack. Now, this is one of those interesting things, and Sophia might have an idea on it, but I never had gout before I cut out the plants. And I had a series of gout attacks happen in both feet, different times, jolly painful. Last May, I had an attack, and I think it was my personal view, okay, is that it was triggered by minor trauma to my foot. Actually throwing a motorbike engine. We had a motorbike engine throwing contest at the festival, okay? And I threw it and stressed my foot, and it inflamed and triggered a gout attack. So my personal belief is that a small amount of inflammation then attracted something that was in excess in my blood, which may have been dumping from God knows where. Anyway, triggered this gout. I had it for 5 weeks, and you don't have gout for 5 weeks. And what I did was, very simple, 48-hour dry fast. My foot was like 50% bigger than it should have been, bright red, could barely walk. 48-hour dry fast, it went, and it's never come back.
Wow.
That was it.
Thank you
So, good.
Get it.
Yeah, I think one of my favourite ones was I've got a Facebook group of psoriatic arthritis, rheumatoid psoriatic and whatever, and somebody I'd consulted with put up this post and said, it's been 2 weeks and I'm completely cured of psoriatic arthritis. But I had to put a note up underneath saying, it's wonderful, but please don't expect this is going to happen. But what this illustrated was that she was only just diagnosed. She was in tremendous pain and it all flared up, but there was no damage, there was nothing. She'd gone to the rheumatologist, got diagnosed with that, and then ignored everything he said. And because she did everything, the whole lot, you know, just in one. She's one of the people who went absolutely full on, you know, PKD ratio, eating, all the light, everything, and it was 2 weeks. But this shows that, you know, usually we only hear of people who've been to these docs and then they've taken meds, and then, you know, years down the line, they expect to hear that. So I had to put something underneath. You know, I've seen it reversed many times, but to put that, I had to put that note underneath saying, absolutely brilliant, but please don't get discouraged if 2 weeks later, you know, if you've had rheumatoid arthritis for 20 years and you've been on methotrexate and God knows what, don't expect that result. But it just shows that if the docs did the stuff that we're talking about here, that would be the standard. We'd see that all the time.
So maybe the biggest medical success I can remember was one of our glioblastoma patients, which is stage 4 cancer, which has an average survival of 6 months. It is treated with surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and still the same death rate, despite doing all this stuff. And we had this patient who was actually a priest himself, and this patient, as everybody else, went into the standard care, did the surgery, radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and the glioblastoma recurred in 8 months. And this was kind of a death sentence to him, and he was not suggested anything else than go home and die. Advice actually, and this patient came to us right after the recurrence of the glioblastoma, which in itself is very deadly, but the recurrent glioblastoma is kind of a death sentence. And he started doing the PKD, and there has been no progression whatever in the last 8 years.
Whoa.
Yes. But other than these results vary greatly for glioblastoma. Overall, it is a very difficult disease and may require several surgeries in addition to the diet. So most often, diet in itself is not enough, but it was enough in this very specific patient. And another one was a child I can remember of. He was diagnosed with a huge brain cancer at the age of 1. And she was also very close to dying, and she was not offered anything because it looked like the terminal stage brain cancer, and the child was put again on the diet, and now this child is 13 years old, and the tumor got smaller, and she never ever touched any vegetable, and she doesn't even know what it is. Imagine a child never eaten anything like a cookie or ice cream or whatever. Maybe doesn't even recognize this stuff.
I was just going to say, with the polycystic kidney disease, there's actually studies out now in humans showing that you can actually reverse this with high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diets. A lot higher protein than most nephrologists would say is safe, but actually that's what the study shows, that higher protein diets actually improve kidney function, doesn't deplete it. In fact, I was speaking to Professor Thomas Wimes, who's a professor, researches specifically polycystic kidney disease at UC Santa Barbara. And he published this study, and they wanted to get grant money from like the NIH for a bigger study, for like a large-scale human trial to show this. And so they submitted that, and the people reviewing it, gave it like the highest ratings, saying, "Oh, this is excellent. This is a great study. This study needs to be done. We should definitely fund this." Went up to the next level, and they declined it because they said these results are too good to be true. And so I was like, so yeah, this works too well. Fuck off, And but they're reapplying now. But that's actually in the preliminary clinical trials and preclinical trials. Certainly, they're showing the reversal by just using ketogenic diet. As far as the most remarkable cases, I mean, I think all of these are all of them are remarkable. Just anything that is currently termed to be irreversible, or a death sentence, or this or that, being able to reverse that, I think that's just miraculous in and of itself. Ivy's recovery from MS, I think that doesn't happen. These things don't happen. And yet I've got a number of patients who it has happened with. And I had one patient, she came in and she was a bit upset, not with me, but with her neurologist, because she had been on a very strict ketogenic lion diet, just high fat, red meat and water. And she was doing really well, and she wanted to come off her medications, and her neurologist yelled at her and said that you're being reckless, you're going to kill yourself, this is just stupid, like, what are you doing? And she left there crying. And so she did it anyway. She came off her meds, and screw him. And 8 months later, she got an MRI, and she had 50% reduction in her lesion, and she's completely symptom-free. And 50% reduction in her lesions, which doesn't happen. They only progress. If you look at the studies, they look at, okay, when you try these medications, versus placebo, or you try ketogenic diet versus medications, and that's been done too. They look at 18-month. How many new lesions come on in 18 months, right, or whatever period of time. And so, like, the ketogenic diet had less new lesions than the standard of care. So this could be a good help to it, right? But there's still new lesions, right? This is the only time that it's actually reversed, the lesions, right? And her neurologist had obviously never seen that before, was completely shocked, and said, I don't know how this happened. I don't know how to explain this. I don't know what this was. And he knew that she was off her medication, so it wasn't that. And she said, okay, well, do you think it might be that diet that I told you I was going to try? No, absolutely not. I was like, okay. So she fired him and said, okay. So she came to me and she said, okay, you're my doctor now for MS. I'm like, no problem. So I think that's amazing, that can happen in the first place. I mean, diabetes, it goes away so easily, and yet this is a ravage of the world right now. It's just destroying the fabrics of society with the burden of disease and the amount of cost that's stripping out of the economy and the society. It's just crazy. And obviously the cancer recoveries. I mean, I mentioned this to a couple of people here, but when I was in the hospital, I met a lady who had just head to toe metastatic breast cancer. It was all up and down her spinal column, so that's where we were seeing her, because we needed to assess her for a spinal fusion or decompression. I told her about this. I said, look, this is something you need to look into, and ketogenic metabolic therapy. And she did, and she's in complete remission. She has no signs of any cancer now. Is that only from that? I mean, she's getting other treatment as well, but she wasn't supposed to have that. She had a very short prognosis and a very dire prognosis. So, to the point that she wasn't a surgical candidate, right? And then she went home to just face the music, and she's in remission. So, you know, I mean, that's obviously amazing. The autoimmune issues are astounding. I mean, they just melt away. You know, so you have someone with Crohn's disease and they have horrible pain, bloody diarrhea 20 times a day, and you just change their diet in 3 weeks, they have no problem. And they get a biopsy in a couple of months and it's clean. It's like they don't have any disease, you know. And yeah, it is. And then their gastroenterologist says, like, oh, does it matter what I eat? For an intestinal issue? Obviously not, you know. And so, no, I think all of these are absolutely amazing. I think probably some of the ones that really sort of like hit me in the heartstrings are like the kids with autism that are completely nonverbal autistic, and all of a sudden they're normal and at the top of their class, you know. And that's happened, you know. There's one kid that was a nonverbal autistic, and then was able to recover and started speaking, acting like a normal kid again. And then, you know, within I don't know, a year or two, tested into the gifted program at his school. Went from being in the special ed class for autistic kids, can't speak, can't function, and now, you know, so mentally debilitated, disabled, that really couldn't function in normal capacity. And now is in a gifted program. I mean, you've given that child an entirely new course of life, and instead of being a dependent for the rest of his life, and unable to interact with the world in a normal fashion, to now being in the gifted program and being able to live a healthy, independent life and have kids and you know, career and goals and aspirations. It's amazing. Probably one of the more uplifting comments that I've ever seen. It's sort of bittersweet, but it's really a lot more sweet when you look at it. Was I did a video on autism and talking about some of these recoveries, and there are whole treatment groups that have been using ketogenic diets for autism for a while now. This isn't new, and they and I was talking about all these different sorts of things and people recovering, and someone left this comment, and think about this from their perspective. They said, imagine living in a world in your own mind's creation and being very happy there, and then one day deciding to only eat meat, and then after a year you realize that the world that you'd always lived in and that you recognized was not the real world, and that the new world was very different, and you didn't have the skills and the job skills and the education and social skills to manage in that new world. Well, I don't have to imagine that. That's my life right now. So that's pretty scary. I mean, this person, their brain didn't work properly. They didn't know what this world was. So they were in a world of their own mind's creation because their brain didn't work properly. But now they started to come out of it, and the brain started developing it. This is an adult, right? And it started coming out of it, and they started, you know, being able to see the world around them, and starting to it started to coalesce in front of their face. It's quite scary because it's a new place and they don't know how to deal with it. And so that's really concerning, but at the same time, like, what an amazing recovery and description of that, right? I mean, what they were going through before, and now they're able to live a normal life. And then the really uplifting thing was there was a number of comments below that said, hey, I was there 2 years ago. It gets better. You'll be fine. Just keep going. You'll learn these skills. You'll meet people. Everything's going to be okay. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, those are my favorite stories.
Well, I've got my own story about my own 3-year-old son who was completely non-verbal. And actually, being an ex-medical doctor, I'd left the profession in 2012 just from my own burnout and stress. Then in 2017, I realised that my 3-year-old was completely non-verbal, had no social skills, was stimming, tiptoe walking, in his own wee world, still in nappies. I could not get him out of nappies. And I had this horrible realisation, this looks like autism to me, right? What could have happened? Looked back, MMR, and I can speak about this here because, you know, I can't speak about it on social media because I could get all my accounts shut down, right? but I was like horrified because I knew as a younger baby he'd been very sociable, giggling, laughing, interacting with his big brothers and sisters quite happily. But then I had this horrible realisation as a doctor myself by background that it had been the MMR that had caused this damage, because I couldn't think of anything else that could have done it, right? And went down a few sort of investigative rabbit holes myself at the time, found out about Dr. Andrew Wakefield's research and properly understood that as a medical profession we hadn't been told the whole truth about what happened with that, and clearly the mainstream media had not told us that his partner on the paper had actually taken the case to the High Court and appealed the decision by the GMC and got the decision overturned. So the appeal court did agree that their paper had been non-fraudulent and they had not lied or made anything up. And actually the conclusion of his paper was that there could be a link between autism and the MMR vaccine and more research was required, is what he said, right? Anyway, witch hunted out of the country, has never changed his opinion on the situation to this day, clearly. And that was the point in 2017 when I realised about my child, about my career, what I had said to many mums and dads who were concerned about the MMR. Don't worry, the paper was shown to be fraudulent, etc. That was a real dark night of the soul for me. I was in floods of tears. What have I done? And then I thought, well, if I have caused damage to my child, I'm going to find a way to fix him, right? So I did. And realising now, because I actually never looked at what PKD was, your definition on the screen today of showing meat and vegetables and fruit in a certain proportion.
Meat, fat, organ meat in a certain proportion.
Sorry?
Meat, fat, organ meat.
Right,
That's
yes.
the definition.
Yeah, okay, right. Well, basically I discovered a compound, a substance. I don't know how many people would. Fascinating stuff. Which all information about that has now been banned from being books on the subject are banned from Amazon, but I actually bought the books at the time from Amazon. I found a book by Kerry Rivera who uses and diet, strict diet to help children with autism. I found that book by her on Amazon. And the work of Jim Humble, which is worth looking into on BitChute because he's been banned from YouTube. He discovered back in the 90s that he managed to heal his own case of malaria that he got in Africa by using drops in his water. It's normally used for water purification out in the wilds, right, or travelling, right? So anyway, I found this, and a few months later, the school was really, he started nursery. I found this information and I hadn't really got going with it yet, what I'm doing with all of this, but I made an appointment with Kerry Rivera on Skype, an hour-long appointment. She sorted me out. She's like, if I had 6 months with your son, I'd sort him out. I was like, well, you just tell me exactly what to do. Spoke to the school. They said, we'll refer him for an autism assessment because they were very concerned about him. He could almost manage on a one-to-one with one of the nursery teachers. He didn't socialise with any of the other children. He would run and hide under the table. No speech whatsoever. Speech and language therapists were trying to teach him sign language. He couldn't communicate at all with anyone other than pointing and screaming, pretty much. And so I was advised to give him on the hour, every hour of every single day, for, well, 8 hours of every single day, made up in water. I took all plant matter out of his diet except for actual fruit and actual vegetables, but no pulses, no grains, no dairy. He did still have eggs and meat, and then like sort of cucumber, tomato sometimes, and some fruit. And did that for a few months. Not a lot of change yet, but I kept going, and then discovered that CBD would be a good idea. I thought, oh, what's CBD? Looked into all that. This was 2018. He was about 3 3/4 by this point, and started giving him 10 milligrams of CBD gummies once a day. 1 week of that, he went from a child like I've just described to a child who could speak in full sentences that you would never have known had a problem with his speech, to the point of running up and hugging me and saying, "I love you, Mum." That was emotional. And that happened during the school holidays. So when he went back to nursery, his nursery teachers were like absolutely blown away. Blown away. I mean, he couldn't even do the sign language for toilet. You know, they were trying to teach him how to say, "I want the toilet." And the funny thing about it was, you know, you're saying that someone like could be trapped in their own self, right? He actually described that about a year later. I mean, by this point, he was a normal child, behaving normally. A few months after that, I took him to his appointment for assessment for autism, and the psychiatrist and the child play leader said, "No, your son's completely normal." And I said, "Yes, he is now, but I've told you the entire story and I've told you what I did, except I didn't talk about the because I didn't. I just thought they're going to take my children away from me." They didn't believe it, but fortunately for me, the speech and language therapist was with me on the appointment, and she said to them, "I saw him before, I see him now. He definitely wasn't a child that just had delayed speech. You know, it wasn't delayed development. He definitely had something wrong with him." So I did have that support. But no, the cognitive dissonance was too much for the doctors. It was like, "Oh, okay then, bye, we're on to the next person now." But yeah, it was diet. I'm sure it was the vast majority of what helped him was taking out the pulses, taking out the grains, taking out the dairy, and he was left with just the bare bones. And I did the same thing with him because I didn't want him just to eat that by himself. But I wanted to share that because you'd said it. But yeah, about a year later, my sister was getting married, and the hairdresser for her is one of my oldest daughter is now 28, one of her friends. And she remembers coming and visiting Hunter when before he could speak, right? And Hunter was introduced to her again, and you know, she was like, "Oh, hello, Hunter. I don't think he'll remember me, will you?" And you know what he said? "Yeah, I do remember you. When I saw you, I couldn't speak though." He couldn't remember speaking. Yeah, he said that to her when he was 5. He could not remember speaking. It was almost like he remembered me being stuck, not being able to communicate with people. So I've tried a lot to share that with a lot of people online or whatever, and it's very difficult to do for fear of getting your like Facebook account shut down or whatever. If anyone's got any suggestions how I can share that story without you know, it's really, really hard. So what I've always tried to do is just tell people out and about so they can spread the word. And Kerry Rivera. And I'm really sorry, I shouldn't have taken the mic like that, but it is really an impressive story about diet. And so I wanted to share. I'm sorry for being on the microphone.
Well done. Okay, I think we should wrap it up now. I know Sophia's got an early flight, and I think a few other people have. So thank you so much for the questions, and thank you so much for coming. And seriously, you guys, thank you for coming. Amazing speeches and
thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.